Hey, warmer for the Evo! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you as it's a Metro Conference preview edition. Typically, it would be the MAAC. They underwent a name change in the offseason, so now it's just a Metro Conference. While there might be a little bit of a name change, same great guest that always joins me to preview this wonderful conference will be joining me in segment number 2, Sam Federman. He is the master of the Metro. He does such amazing work over there at Mid-Major Madness. He is out there in the northeast part of the country. He is dedicated to this conference. We're going to chat with him about all 13 of these teams. It's going to be a big, giant bundle of fun, and he's going to really enlighten us in terms of the coaching changes that we've seen here in the offseason, the styles of play, the rosters, and so much more. Here in the first segment, I'm going to be taking a look at a little bit of what we've gotten in terms of betting trends in the Metro Atlantic over the last year or two. We'll take a look at the tempos that you can expect as well from these teams, and then in the final segment, I'm going to get you guys my projector or finish for the Metro. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, RCM, they mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via the 5-star review. And I do beg with you, I do plead with you, please do send in these Twitter/X questions because they help me out in terms of what you want to hear in the off season to help me also get you prepared for what I hope to be the greatest college basketball season of all time. Now, I do leave these conference previews just as a standalone because I want to make sure that whether you're listening to this in late July, August, September, October, that you're getting great information to get set for the upcoming college basketball season. So that's the objective here, and all of these conferences deserve sparkle and shine, just like the Metro Atlantic. So how about if we do dive in and take a look at a Metro Atlantic that has a lot of slow teams out there. It might change a little bit for Siena, who's one of the slowest teams in this conference and the representative of the NCAA tournament last year. They do lose their coach in Jerry McNamara. They hire on Nevada Smith, who was over at Marquette last season, but this was a team that was 359th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and so many of these teams in the Metro are just so stinking slow. Niagara, they were your slowest team out of 365 Division I teams last year, 363rd in terms of total possessions per game. Now, it does bump up a little bit in terms of tempo, but it's not like you've got a lot of teams that are just absolutely running it and gunning it. Canisius, they were 351st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You know that St. Peter's is going to play slow. They were 317th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Marist is always a little bit of a slug. Hey, 395th in terms of total possessions per game was honestly a little bit faster for them. Merrimack was 357th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. One of your lightning speed teams was Iona. They were 119th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Quinnipiac, 127th. Again, that is considered to be a blazer in this conference. You do have one or two teams that are a little bit more middle of the road. Still slower, but Fairfield, they were more around about 263rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Sacred Heart is always a team that looks to bump it up, but even they were 202nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Mount St. Mary's is another team that was relatively slow last year, 244th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And then you had the Manhattan Jaspers, who they just did not have things go to form for them. Not having Bull Sidner last year, that was really rough for them. 196th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And you'll notice this with a lot of these teams, not necessarily the greatest shooting teams. This is very much of a defense wins championships sort of conference. Like, you just take a look at some of these teams, and Marist was so good on defense last year. How about Mambo number 5 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis? That was by far the best mark out there in the conference, but you know that St. Peter's is always going to bring it on defense. They were 81st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Siena was 48th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Even a team like an Iona was 82nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Again, is this a little bit of a byproduct of the fact that you didn't necessarily have the world's greatest three-point shooting in this conference? Sure, but Quinnipiac, 73rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I will say the teams that were bad on defense were just bad on defense. Manhattan, 333rd in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Canisius was 227th. Not like overly awful, but still For this conference, not great. Rider, they're just a wet match in a dark cave right now, 342nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got another team like a MAAC who was 62nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Sacred Heart, another one of those teams that they really struggle on defense, 299. So you're either really, really good or really, really bad on defense. Niagara, they were hovering right around about 280th in the country in terms of total points allowed on a per possession basis, and it's a clear have and have-nots sort of ordeal with regards to generating turnovers, as well as last year Merrimack and St. Peter's were both in the top 20 in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Merrimack was 17th. They always find themselves there. I believe they've been in the top 25 in every single season since they joined the Division I ranks. St. Peter's 20th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and Marist is always really good with regards to their shooting percentages. They really cranked it up with regards to turnovers last year as well. They were 34th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Now, you would see quite a bit of a fall off from there. Like Iona was more of a middle of the road team. They were really good with their 3-point shooting defense, but 180th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. For Quinnipiac, an above average team, they were about 121st, and then your have-nots, they were teams that were rough here. Rider was 266th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on defense. You had Mount St. Mary's be 259th, and Mount St. Mary's bottom 5 team in terms of taking care of the ball as well. That was doomsday for them. Niagara more middle of the road, 181st in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Sacred Heart, they had a rough go of at 318th in terms of generating turnovers. Fairfield was the team that more dominated the glass, so they were a little bit more neither here nor there with regards to generating turnovers. They were 163rd in all of college basketball, and this is very much a conference that is based around second chances as well. Typically, the shooting is very, very low with a lot of these teams. At Fairfield, they rebounded 34.6% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, 20th in all of college basketball, and they weren't even the best team in the conference. How about St. Peter's? They rebounded 35.9% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That was 12th in all of college basketball. Now you'll see a little bit of a fall from there. Again, have and have-nots. Iona, 298th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that resulted in an offensive rebound. Rider was actually okay. Like, Rider was 98th in terms of percentage of their missed shots that resulted in an offensive rebound, so they were able to do a solid job in terms of giving themselves some second and third chances. Quinnipiac was a team that was good on the glass as well, 50th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that resulted in an offensive rebound. Siena, maybe not creme de la creme, but again, 119th out of 365 Division I teams. With this regard, that's solid. And then Merrimack, I talk about how great they are in terms of generating turnovers. This team always gets line-based on the glass. That's their kryptonite, 339th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that resulted in an offensive rebound. Niagara always gets blasted on the glass, 347th in terms of percentage of their misses that resulted in an offensive rebound. And then Sacred Heart, a little bit more of a bottom team as well here, 235th with regards to percentage of their misses that resulted in an offensive rebound, and that leads to a very interesting dynamic with regards to totals, because when it comes to the Metro Conference, this is typically a really good conference for unders, and every single team played more unders than overs. Every single one of them. Your top over team was Niagara, 14 overs and 15 unders. That was just a byproduct of the fact that they weren't good at guarding anything whatsoever last year. Sacred Heart, 15 overs, 17 unders. Fairfield, 14 overs, 19 unders. Manhattan, 13 overs, 18 unders. Quinnipiac, 12 overs, 19 unders. Marist, 11 overs, 18 unders. Iona, 12 overs, 20 unders. St. Peter's, 10 overs, 18 unders. Merrimack, 12 overs, 22 unders. Mount St. Mary's, 10 overs, 21 unders. Rider, 9 overs, 19 unders. Siena, 11 overs, 24 unders. And then Canisius, 72.4% of their games went under the total. 8 overs to 21 unders. As a matter of fact, Delaware State, Fordham, UT Arlington, lone 3 teams out there in college basketball that had a better under percentage than that. So, I mean, there's your trends right there. We're not even going to go into the splits. Like, the unders just hit in the Metro Conference. So, there's that aspect of things. And then, if you're looking for teams that were able to make you money against the spread, Siena, really nice season for them, 21-14 against the spread. You had some demonstratively good teams, and then you had Rider. Bookmakers just could not price Rider correctly because they were that bad. 7, 18, and 3 against the spread. And that was one of the worst marks that we saw in all of college basketball. That's a 28% hit rate in terms of cover percentage. Only Kansas City, UMKC, who went 5-23 last year, had a worse cover percentage than Rider last season. Then it gets a little bit more respectable. Manhattan was a big fat disappointment last year. They did not have Will Sidner. That caused things at toilet bowl, 11, 19, and 1 against the spread. And then the rest of the teams, neither here nor there. You had a few money-making teams. Iona was 19-13 against the spread. St. Peter's 16-11-1 against the spread. And then MAAC 19-14-1 against the spread. Rest of these teams, somewhere in the neighborhood about 43 to 56% with regards to hit rate, like Mount St. Mary's 17-13-1 against the spread. Maris 15-13-1 against the spread. Sacred Heart 15-17. Fairfield 15-18. Niagara 13-16. Same goes for Canisius. Quinnipiac 13-17-1 against the spread. And well, you'll notice here in the Metro, not a lot of travel, and that's a big reason why you've typically seen road teams do really well in this conference. Rider and Manhattan were exceptions. For Rider, 4-9-3 against the spread. They just didn't cover anywhere. Heck, they covered better away from home rather than at home, so yay, verily there. Manhattan 4-10-1 against the spread, went away from home. And then Niagara was another team because they have got a little bit more travel than most. 6-10 against the spread away from home. Every other team was 6-8 or better, with Maris and St. Peter's at 6-8, Canisius 7-9, Sacred Heart was 8-10 against the spread away from home, and then Merrimack 9-8, Fairfield was 8-7 against the spread away from home, 9-7 for both Siena and Quinnipiac, Mount St. Mary's 10-7-1, and then Iona, your top team at 9-5 against the spread away from home. And what else I think is very interesting with this conference is the way that the favorites were able to do a really nice job last season. Typically, it's a little bit more of an underdog league, but we saw a big divide between the haves and the have-nots. Rider and Canisius both went 0-2 against the spread as a favorite. That was not great for them. And Quinnipiac fell a little bit short, 8-13-1 against the spread as a favorite. You saw Sacred Heart go 6-9 against the spread as a favorite. Fairfield was 7-9. And then you had Iona at 10-10, Manhattan at 4-5. But then how about Maris? 11-8-1 against the spread as a favorite. Merrimack 10-7-1 against the spread. St. Peter's 9-6-1 against the spread as a favorite. Mount St. Mary's, how about 10-1 against the spread as a favorite? Like, holy crud. They were good against the spread as a favorite. Among teams that were a favorite in at least 5 games last year, that was your top cover rate in all of college basketball. So when they were a favorite, they were absolutely cleaning house there. And then you also had a nice mark for Niagara 2-1. I know that's a small sample size, but do think that that's really interesting as well, because you typically have much shorter spreads here in the Metro Conference. So that's the trends that we saw in the Metro Conference, a little bit about the styles of play. And now coming next, how about if we do chat it up with our good friend Sam Federman, the master of the Metro. He joins me next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beeson Family Podcast, the Metro Conference Preview. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. We're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. This is the Metro Conference Preview Edition. Typically it'd be the MAAC, MAAC, but a little bit of a name change. But the same man that has joined me the last few years, joining me once again, Sam Federman. He does such an excellent job taking a look at this conference, really second to none. He's over there at Mid-Major Madness and so much more. And you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at Sam_Federman all together. And to get the podcast correct, it's Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers podcast. And Sam, it's great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, not the first time that I've thought about the fact that we didn't name the podcast something that is easy to remember.
It is all good.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Sam. And Sam, it is a great conference. Last year that we're going to have this team in there, so figured we would go here first with Fairfield, a team that was really good on glass last year. Their 2-point shooting probably left a little bit of something to be desired, but want to get your thoughts on this team because it really feels like they should be rock solid down low. It looks like they should be getting Kadir Martin in the fold as well, along with some of the other gentlemen that were so good down low for them. And I feel like this is a team that can make some noise in this conference.
They're definitely expecting to. They were really good at the end of the year. I mean, remember this is a team that started 0-4 in conference play and rallied to finish 11-9. They were 3-6, and then they were 11-8. They won 8 of 10 games late in the season, made a run to the MAAC semifinals. Obviously, Brandon Benjamin is gone, Braden Sparks is gone. Those are your two best players. But I'm expecting big jumps from Declan Walker-Fennig and Tony Williams. I think Tony Williams might kind of be the type of guy that shines in a bigger role. We saw he was really good in the MAAC tournament. I thought he can defend a little bit. He's a little undersized, but I think that he's got some skill to him, and I think he'll be really good in the guard spot. Along with they've got with Declan coming back in the front court and Kadir Martin coming in. You mentioned him. They like Marko Radunovic, a transfer from Boston College, a lot. Halon Rollins returns, and I think he's very raw but very talented as well. Isaac Mankati, at this point in his career, is a veteran now and will provide some of the true five stuff that they maybe don't have from the rest of the roster. Obviously, they'll get Peyton Smith back, but we'll have to see what he turns into. Interesting freshman class too. Ja Hatchett, Big Osako, Cole Edelin from Kentucky. Really interesting prospect, can really shoot it. But yeah, I think Fairfield's going to be a team to watch throughout the season. Definitely one of the better teams in this league.
Yep, I'm in agreement with you there. There's certainly a team that I think is going to be in the upper half of the conference. I hate to be like this, but this is a team that I don't think is going to be in the upper half of the conference. That'd be Ryder. Just a big, giant struggle for them last year. The one thing they did okay was rebound, and they lose a lot of their top rebounders from a season ago. I think they'll be better. Looks like they should be bringing in Bryce Baker, who was okay over at Winthrop a few years ago. Mark Butler is a double-figure scorer from Lafayette, but I mean, with Ryder just going outside of basketball, they're facing a lot of debt right now with the university in general. Basketball probably not the number one priority for them, and just feels like they're lagging behind in this conference.
If you look at a graph of rim and three rate offense and rim and three rate defense for the conference, you're going to see Ryder in not just the bottom right corner, but like so deep in the bottom right corner that it's almost unfathomable. And I like Mark Butler, but he's not an outside shooter. I think that they have some interesting pieces that would maybe be solid bench pieces in other spots. Ty Bevins, I think, has some upside, has been a part of a rotation at the A10 level. I think there might be something there. Guys like Horace Simmons, Bryce Baker, Khalil Farmer. These are all kind of dart throws from Kevin Baggett, and those are kind of the moves that he has to make at this point. He took some dart throws last year that didn't really work out, trying to build around Flash Burton and Zion Cruz. I think that kind of building this roster from scratch might benefit in that sense, that they're not tongue-tied to those two high-usage guards. But I'm not really sure where the extra scoring is coming from. I'm not really sure where the five spot is coming from for this team. We'll have to see. I'm not convinced by their offseason.
Yeah, I'm not either. I feel like we're very much in lockstep there. And if you bet against Ryder last season, well, you made yourself a whole bunch of money. And this was a team that was rough last season as well. But at the very least, there were some flashes there. Canisius, no doubt about it. This is probably not going to be a team that's going to be competing for the title in the conference or anything like that. But I like them bringing in Nate Fouts. I'm probably going to get this name incorrect, but Vinny Sagana, he comes over from East Texas A&M, solid three-point shooter. Michael Wilson from Bellarmine. I think that they actually have some solid starters. It just feels like the reserves and the overall bench and depth is just not going to be there for Canisius to match up with those top teams.
My kind of view of Canisius is that it's kind of a compilation of a bunch of decent players and nobody that really stands out to me as a go-to guy. I think Fouts is a good player. I think Sagona has a chance to be a good player. Damaris Winters has the chance to be a good player. But like, there's no one that you look at and jumps out to you as the star. Like Will Fowler put up big numbers, but at a really low D2 level, and the analytics are whatever on him. I think we'll have to see whether any of the freshmen can be impact players. Dorset Mulcahy, Alex Mack, Abu Riak. I would not be surprised if one of them turns into a contributor at some point. I think they're going to need them to for the upside. Forgot to mention Priest Ryan as just like a guy who has some experience in there. But again, this is not a team that jumps out to you with a ton of high-end talent. I think that roster depth certainly better than it was 2 years ago, which was a big problem. But I don't know if they upgraded the talent level of this roster quite enough. But definitely better than they were 2 years ago. I don't think they'll go on an 11-game losing streak again this year like they did last year. I also am not sure that the top of the league is quite as separated from the bottom of the league this year in terms of where Canisius could be. So maybe they get to 6 or 7 wins instead of 5. But again, they could also still get to 3 or 4 or 5. Like, we'll have to see what happens there. Jim Christian, through 2 seasons, I think I did the calculation. He is 8-32 in MAAC games. He has not made the MAAC tournament.
Yep, no question about it. I like Coach Christian as well, but it's taken him quite a while. He was dealt a bad hand when we'll see if season number 3 is a turnaround there. For Sam Federman, you can find him over at Mid-Major Madness. Does such an excellent job looking at the Metro Conference, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And then this team I just felt like was stink, but for Manhattan, they were banking on Will Sidner being such an amazing player after he had that great freshman year. Never gets out there on the floor. He's now in the Big Ten, so I had to retool from there. I like Coach Gallagher. He does a solid job. Ben Tweedy comes in after he was a nice player over at Colgate. You got some mix and match guys like a Kevin Kearney, I honestly think is a nice upside guy. Josiah Sabino is a guy that comes over from Niagara, so he knows the conference. Want to get your thoughts here because I think that it's going to be better for Manhattan, but my goodness, they need to be better on defense than they were a season ago.
I think they're probably going to be a little better on defense than last year. I mean, for all that Winston and Dinkins were, they were two really small guards that played together a lot of the time. Just having Tweedy's size in the backcourt, Sabino's size in the backcourt as well, I think will upgrade the defense of the backcourt, even though Winston, good ball hawk, not overall terrific defender, though. They are still they're still going to add one more big man to get a true 5 out there. It hasn't been announced yet. They're going to add someone. But I do think some of the guys they have on this roster are interesting. Anthony Pacciarelli had some really good JUCO numbers, obviously low level though. Ogden Stankovic was a guy that I liked coming into Akron last year. Isaac Johnson and Deshaun Lewis also some interesting JUCO numbers. But yeah, I think Sabino and Tweedy are the two main names that they're bringing in out of the transfer portal. Brought in a couple international guys as well. Dusan Eric and Novak Meniovic. Also look at Karan Elliott. Was a freshman point guard last year. Joined the team in about August or something. Had some flashes. I think he could have a good year.
Yeah, but I think that this team might be able to have some flashes as well. Sacred Heart is a team that always is going to go bombs away from 3. They're always going to pop it from 3. And JoJo Wallace, I recognize it was over at Southern New Hampshire University, but guy was putting up darn near 25 points per game. So I do think that he'll be able to have some production right away. I like Samson Riley coming in from Quinnipiac as well. I think that that's a good find. Sacred Heart always has question marks on the defensive side of things, but I do think that the 3-point shooting is going to be some of the better ones in the conference.
Big upside swings on their D2 guys. JoJo Wallace, Kedrick Curtis, guys that averaged a combined 42 points a game at the Division II level last year. They're betting on those guys being their big scoring wings. Obviously, they like Jalen Robinson, who they brought in from Richmond. I think that's a good get for some physicality. Can play a little bit of 3 and 4. I am definitely a little concerned about the 5 spot. Maybe they can get Jeremiah Jacobs to take a step forward and be a contributor. But Abdul Yad did not really show that he can play the 5 very well last year. Maybe he has a better year this year. But I think that it's certainly possible. The size is there. The talent is there. Jovan Buganout from Indiana State at the point. I think that's also a really smart add. I think that having a point guard that, I mean, for all Makai Connor was best transition hit-ahead passer in the conference the last 2 years. I think that having the ball in his hands as much as it did could have perhaps hindered what Sacred Heart's greatest offensive strength was, which was the diversity of scorers. Obviously, Wallace and Curtis are going to be the two guys you're looking at as the main guys for this year, and Robinson, and if Riley comes out and shoots. And Von Buganout doesn't need to have the ball in his hands as much as Connor did.
Yep, and I do think that there is some upside here with Sacred Heart.
And forgot to mention Griffin Baruch coming back from an injury. That's another elite shooter.
Yep, more depth than they've had in past years. I really like that for Sacred Heart, and this is a team I think is going to be so interesting because they were the team that represented in the NCAA tournament. Siena, now they're going the Nevada route. Nevada Smith is the new coach for this team. They do retain a few guys from the roster last year. Reed Descharme, who was missing due to injury. I think that that's good, and then I'm going to get the same incorrect, but Tane Yizaglu, really liked him over at VMI. Stachi Stuffer, but that was a team that was relatively rough. And then Pace Prosser, the Division II Gannon transfer, is a guy guy that I think has some upside as well. Want to get your thoughts here, because I think that would be far-fetched to think that they're going to be back where they were last season, but I thought the Nevada Smith hire was solid. I feel like he's been able to bring in some guys that have some good, shall we say, flexibility and have some good versatility for this roster.
Yeah, I think Nevada Smith was a smart hire. Definitely like it better than some of the kind of retread names that were flying out there, namely Mike Hopkins. But Pace Prosser, you mentioned it. To me, this is probably the easiest choice for Metro preseason player of the year. A guy who's already been the best player on a national champion on a really good, really good Division II team. Can be that lead point guard, just a total monster. Can shoot it, can drive, can pass, physical, can defend. Can play in different styles. Brendan Coyle is a perfect fit for what Nevada Smith wants to do in terms of getting threes up. Parrish Edmond is going to bring some awesome athleticism on the wing. Think he's one of the better freshmen in the conference. And then you kind of get into the international men of mystery with this team. Timi Ibukunu Luwo, I'm still going to need to learn how to pronounce that name at some point. It's kind of physical Australian piece. Andre Simone and Giannis Steger as the fives, Mana Martin as kind of a two guard. We'll have to see what happens there. They also brought back Reed Ducharme and Isaiah Henderson, Owen Schlager too. Those are some wings that they can use. But yeah, we're gonna learn a lot about this team kind of early in the season based on kind of what their rotations look like. I could see them having 7 guys. I could see them having 10 guys. I really don't know which of the international men of mystery are going to be big contributors for them. And them and Niagara are the two teams that you look at in that sense where it's kind of the biggest swing pieces. But I do think that their floor is much higher, obviously, than Niagara's because of what we do know about their roster in terms of Prosser, Coyle, Edmond. And I think that the baseline level of international players is probably good too.
And we can go seamlessly into Niagara here because they're a team that they always struggle on the glass. 347th in terms of offensive rebound percentage last year. And I like the fact that they're bringing in the Long Beach State transfer and Colin Farrell. I think that he's going to be able to come in, give them some upside. They should have Trenton Walters back from a season ago. Bastian Reber is a guy that I think is interesting. But you mentioned it. A few international men of mystery. Tay Blackshear is really the guy that stands out to me from Youngstown State. But for Niagara, I think that the one thing that they can't get around is that until they get better on the glass, I think that they're going to have a tough time in this conference.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure what the 5 spot looks like for them. It's not the strongest unit out there, but you mentioned it, Bastian Reber. I think that's a good get. Guy was a rotation player at Fresno State in the Mountain West. Can come over and be a piece, probably a starting point guard. Name you didn't mention, freshman Rui. He's Canadian. He played in the prep schools last year down in Virginia and put up some really big numbers. I think that's the big upside piece for Niagara. If Rui hits this, that's a guy that can be a little bit of a dribble pass shoot wing. I don't know how good he's going to be. Maybe he's terrible. Maybe he's really good. That's the guy that I would pinpoint as the big upside swing. And yeah, you mentioned it with the international guys. They just added one that I haven't entered into my database yet, but they've also got Fidel Rota, Noah Slingerland, Samuel Mikoli, Daniel Imokere. I think from my early research, Mikoli is probably the best of the group, but we'll have to see with this. And you mentioned Blackshear as well. I think Blackshear is probably one of the higher floor players on the team. Should be a good contributor. But yeah, just overall, the talent level, they have to be really creative with their rosters because the NIL situation is just not great, and that goes for a bunch of teams in this league. Niagara's creativity this year comes in the international route, and again, we'll have to see if it turns out to work for them. Going with this roster, they'll definitely have more backcourt size than last year when they really kind of just decided, all right, here we go, we're gonna have our 3 primary ball handlers being all 6 foot or shorter, 5'10 Brian Griffith, 5'9 Trenton Walters, and 6 foot Reggie Prudhomme. And they couldn't play them all together. They couldn't play 2 of them together for the most part. And it got to a point where they were struggling defensively, they were struggling offensively. They couldn't, and they weren't pushing the ball to the floor. And they don't want to push the ball to the floor. But I think that the fact of the matter is they definitely solved the issue of backcourt size. I don't know if they have quite enough talent though. We'll have to see.
Yep, we will have to see. As our good friend Sam Federman does such great work over at Mid-Major Madness, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and we have to see on this team in Quinnipiac. They do lose so many of those guys like Amari Monroe and company that were so good last year. Keith McKnight was a really nice freshman, though. Retaining him, I think, is a good place to start. And we've talked about the Gannon team that was so good at the Division II ranks. Lucas Sikasi, he comes over after he was a double-figure scorer from that team. I do like some of the freshmen that they come in. Jaden Reed is a guy that at 6'10" has some size. I believe Ali Diop is another one as well. Want to get your thoughts on Quinnipiac because definitely a new look team. I don't know if they're going to quite be where they were from a season ago, but it's very clear that they're bringing in some upside guys like an Oz Hart with some size.
Quinnipiac was disappointing last year from the sake of we thought this was a team that obviously Amari Monroe, Jaden Zimmerman, we knew how good they were, and maybe Zimmerman was a little underwhelming last year after coming back from the injury. Maybe Monroe wasn't quite as good as he was 2 years ago for them. So kind of underperformed a little bit. I don't think that should make us too down on this roster. There were a lot of Quinnipiac fans that were wondering what the roster would look like after so many guys left. And I actually think they came out of it looking a lot better than most people would have expected. You mentioned Lucas Sikasi. I think that's a guy that can be an all-MAC player. Keith McKnight coming back. That I mentioned Prosser as Metro Player of the Year. I'm gonna have to get used to saying Metro. McKnight is probably the choice if you want a player that is a returning player in the Metro. It's probably McKnight that you're choosing in that spot. Really, really good player. Can play a little 4 or 5 as well. Would love to see a little bit more of an outside shot from him, or any shot whatsoever that isn't a dunk or layup. I think that would really benefit his game. And then some of the transfers, Tayshawn Cunningham Pemberton, Division II guy that can score. I think he'll give them some of that secondary scoring. And they bring back Ty Turnage. He'll play the point. They got Nadas Cholivinskas and Ali Diouf, kind of later arriving freshman. Cholivinskas from Europe. I've heard he can really shoot it. Ali Diouf is a guy that I saw a little bit of last summer in 25, and he's got some upside to him. We'll have to see how it turns out. Malik Fields, another freshman that can play. We'll have to see how much he factors into the rotation this year. I do think Quinnipiac is set up to be a top half team again, and I think that bounced back well from how much they lost in terms of what their roster looks like.
Yep, I do like a lot of the additions that they've made. And when it comes to this team, maybe they're not making the biggest splash additions in the world, but they've got one guy that I think is very intriguing. That'd be St. Peter's, because Trey Patterson has had a long and winding road. Guy began at Villanova. He spent some time at Rice. He's just bounced around so much. I don't know what they're going to get out of him. I think that they get his extra credit because we know this team will be good on defense. They were actually able to do a very nice job in terms of their offensive rebounding last year as well. You get back Bryce Eaton, who was averaging 11 plus points per game. I like the guys like Akil Watson who comes in, Bryson Wilson. Want to get your thoughts here because with St. Peter's, we know the defense will be there. If they can get a lick of shooting, I think that this team can really ascend.
I'm assuming every year St. Peter's roster is trickles out over the course of the offseason. I'm assuming that they're going to add a big man at some point over the next couple months, because the situation they have right now is where Akil Watson and Trey Patterson are their two kind of forwards, and Patterson is more 4, Watson is more 3-4, and obviously neither of them have played a ton of basketball over the last few years, with Patterson having his problems. Watson missed the entire year last year. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But I do think the backcourt's good. Bryce Eaton's awesome. He's fun. Ken Walker coming in from Davenport. That's a guy that can really score at the D2 level. Elijah Perkins is back too. And that's another guy who was productive and impactful for them last year. I think when St. Peter's was good, Elijah Perkins was good. He's a good defender. Bryson Wilson from Binghamton, I think that's a good addition too. But if they need him to play 4, that's different from him playing at 3. And I just think overall size-wise, that was such a benefit for them last year because they had so much of a front court that, we'll just have to see what this roster ends up looking like. But right now, you've got Xavier Thomas, another D2 transfer. But there's just not a lot of room to judge this team because I don't know what that front court is going to look like on opening night.
Yep, I think that that's such a good point, and this is a team that relies upon rebounding, so no doubt about it. They are going to need to have a little bit more clarity there, and this is a team that always relies upon their front court as well. Mount St. Mary's, I think that they did a great job bringing in Wogun's Exacte from Drake. He was a guy that I really liked. And I think that Cade Olmes, who he comes over from Gonzaga, he's got a little bit of upside as well. Very clear Mount St. Mary's needs to do a better job with turnovers. Didn't generate a lot on defense. They turned the ball over way too much on offense, but bringing in these guys like Anthony Arrington and company, I think is going to help them out. And I do think that for Mount St. Mary's, that ball security is going to be better this season.
I mean, that's been a thing for them for the last few years, and they've been fine despite it. Donnie Lynn still has kind of insisted that like that they're trying to improve it. That like it's not necessarily by design that the turnover margin is the way it is, and obviously it shouldn't be by design. I think that's more of just like something that has come out of it. They've been fine despite it. Red Thompson coming in from Longwood can score out of the point guard spot. I think they'll get some scoring out of him. Mikhail Lumpart as a Division II transfer can really shoot it. As you mentioned, Exacte, and I think that front court with him, AK Kebe. AK Kebe, to me, another guy that could be in the Metro Player of the Year conversation. A lot of people were underrating him last year because he didn't have the biggest counting stat numbers, and maybe the offensive skill doesn't jump off the charts, but the defensive effort, the switchability and length is all there. He is, I don't want to say like on the Dola Adebayo trajectory, because I think it's a little different from that. Kind of the idea of a guy that just got so much better from freshman to sophomore year, and just feel like he's going to get so much better from sophomore to junior year. Probably my pick for defensive player of the year in the conference, and will definitely be in the conversation for Metro first team in the preseason. Probably will be on my preseason first team, AKK in that front court. And you mentioned Arrington. It's another shooter that they're going to have, and Stas Rosakayas shooting off the bench. Well, we will have to see like just how good this backcourt is, because I mean, with Thompson and Lumpart and Arrington, there's not a lot of sure things. Thompson probably is close to a sure thing, but again, he's not exactly shown a ton as a passer, and I want to see how that goes. The playmaking is probably my biggest concern for this team, and then Yaki Diop has to take a step forward in terms of his skill level over the offseason if he wants to play bigger minutes at the 5.
Yep, and then when it comes to things in the Metro, I don't think that there's a lot of sure things. I know that Maris is going to be great on defense. So this team every single year is tremendous. If you look at raw points allowed on a per possession basis, one of the best mid-major teams in all of college basketball. Getting back Jaden Cullen Roberts is something that I really like. Not the biggest scorer in the world, but he'll give you a steal, some assists, some rebounds. Love him. And I thought that Jack Graham, coming over from New Hampshire, that's a great ad. If I'm not mistaken, they're bringing in Greedy Williams from UNC Wilmington. Maybe I misread that, but if that's the case, I absolutely love that ad. And then they had a few guys that were banged up last season that are going to be back in the fold as well. Getting Tariq Watson after he played only 10 games. I really like this Maris team. They've been close but no cigar in terms of making the NCAA tournament. I feel like they could be right towards the top of the conference this year.
The different Joshua Williams, but I can see the confusion. But this Joshua Williams is a big time scorer from JUCO. It's clear what they wanted to get out and do in the transfer portal and scouting this offseason, because they knew obviously they were bringing back Jaden Collins Roberts, but you're losing Justin Menard, you're losing Rajon Blackwell, you're losing Elijah Lewis. Jason Schofield's gone. Jaden Daughtry's gone. That's a lot of your scorers. And they brought in 3 guys that averaged double digits at the collegiate level last year in Jack Graham from New Hampshire, as you mentioned. Josh Williams, as I mentioned, Coastal Alabama. St. Anselm transfer Edward Onya, who was the rookie of the year in that conference at 11 and a half and 6.4 rebounds per game. So I think adding those guys is huge for what they're going to need to be offensively. Kind of their ceiling is going to rely on that, because Collins Roberts at this point, good player, not necessarily sure he's a ceiling raiser in that sense of what he is. And I think they're also going to need to get a little bit more out of Miles Parker and Jordan Gabriel this coming year. They had some moments as freshmen last year. Parker is a really, really talented shooter. Gabriel's a 5-man. Tariq Watson's going to start at 5, I would think, if he's fully healthy, which I think by the season and throughout the year. Tariq Watson, skilled guy, talented guy, but can kind of have the same Schofieldism of you play him for like 8 minutes, he scores 8 points, but he's a -7. It feels like I've had some of those moments with him, but there's some skill level there. And I do think that, as you mentioned, Maris defense is always good. A lot of freshmen, too, coming in here. Dwayne Chess, Brady McAdams, Brandon Arnold, Logan France, Logan Rodriguez too. So a lot of bites at the apple in terms of freshmen. Forgot Cam Sweeney as well. But this team probably comes down to the 2, 3, 4 of Graham Williams, Onya, and like how those guys transfer in.
Yep, I agree with you there. As joining me on the show, we've got our good friend Sam Federman. Does such great work over at Mid-Major Madness, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And then this team has been towards the top of the Metro ever since they joined it, have yet to bust through for that NCAA tournament bid. That'd be Merrimack. I love the fact that they bring back Todd Brogna. Was honestly expecting a little bit more from him last year, but he should help out the fact that the one Merrimack kryptonite is always rebounding, and he was very solid over at Stone Hill 2 years ago, bringing back a guy in Ty Dorsett, who was averaging over 11 points per game is solid. Denver Anglin is a guy that has a lot of experience in the conference, and Eli Wilborn was just stuck on the bench the last few years over at James Madison. Like him as well for Merrimack. I don't know if they quite break through into the NCAA tournament, but I think that they're back towards the conference once again.
Yeah, I mean, the key is Jeremiah Anderson, whether he's going to be able to play. I think they think he's going to be able to play, and at this point, I mean, I don't know exactly where that is, but they think he's going to play. People around the sport, though, have kind of maybe thought that he wasn't at certain points. I'm not sure where that stands at the moment. But Jeremiah Anderson, if he comes in, I think, again, that's a guy that could be a Metro Player of the Year candidate right away. Was the Met Basketball Writers Association Division II Player of the Year in the New York City region at Felician. Led Felician to 27 wins. Can score, can pass. Would just be another one in the line of Gallo point guards. But then getting Denver Anglin and AJ Lesbert, two guys that if kind of play them around Anderson, they can be your shooters like a Savage and Becht were, and like probably not quite as dynamic as what Dorsett was. But then there's Todd Brogna and Eli Wilborn in the front court as well, and you'll have to see Brogna at a more natural position for him at the 4. Wilborn as a physical 5. The rebounding will still struggle, but maybe Wilborn gives them a little bit more there. I'm not sure he's quite the defensive menace that Ugwakazi and Atumnu have been, but I think that he's probably a little bit more of an offensive piece in that sense if he plays at his ceiling. We'll have to see what they get out of their freshmen, too, if they need to. They brought in Aram Soki Urbano as well, a guy that they really, really wanted him last year. Ended up going to Fresno State, didn't play a ton. And he jumped in the portal, and they were very thrilled to be able to get him.
Yep, absolutely. I'd be thrilled as well, and it's going to be very interesting to see how that roster is able to shake out. And we've got one last team to take a look at with Iona, where, I mean, this has always been a team that's been towards the top of the conference. Last year, they passed off to Dan Gario. A little bit up and down for them. Really good three-point shooting defensive team, a team that left a little bit of something on the glass. Want to get your thoughts on an Iona team that they're going to be bringing back a few pieces from a season ago, but they very much did at the transfer portal here. Someone like a Martin Keel, who comes over from Idaho State, I think is going to be big for them. Kevon Vanderhorst, who was over at Drexel. Very interesting team, and I think that Aiden Disu is a guy that some people are sleeping on, along with Keyshawn Mitchell, who was really good over at Bryant 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a theme of what I've talked about has been lack of proven big man play. I think that Iona bucks that trend. They have two guys that I think are legit big men in Aliu Fall and Keyshawn Mitchell, which is just so important at this age of college basketball. We talk about the Metro, the MAAC in the past. It's a guards league. And yeah, the guards will probably win championships, but you need bigs too. What they've got with Mitchell and Fall is two guys with size that can defend, that'll give them what they need. Probably the best two-man center duo in this conference at the moment. And you mentioned it with Dessou as a guy coming in from Holy Cross, another guy that can bring some physicality in that front court. But for me, I think Kozi Akametsu is the key ceiling guy. He's got to be really good. I think he's got to be the best player on this team, and I think he can be one of the best players in the conference as well. Kind of showed some flashes towards the end of the year. He's an athletic slasher. Maybe we see him more on the ball this year. Maybe we see him develop and continue to be more of a reliable go-to guy, which is I think Iona's going to want and need him to be. But Vanderhorst is a veteran point guard to kind of balance things out. They like their European guys that they brought in as well, and Pangiotis Leifas and Oliver Sasella. They've got Sadiku Ibeen Ayo back, who was at Iona under Rick Pitino, and he's a physical wing with experience at St. John's that can give them some defensive punch, that can maybe show a little bit more offensively that he hasn't. But they will be able to play Luke Jungers as well, coming back, another guy that can really shoot it. So I think this is a diverse roster, even if it's not the most, and it is one of the most talented rosters in the conference. It's a very good roster. And it's also a diverse roster. I think there's a lot of skill sets, a lot of different ways you can slice it, and I'm interested to see how Dan Giroux plays it.
Yep, I am as well, and I'm intrigued by this entire conference. Sam, you are the master of the Metro. I always love getting you on this podcast every single year for this preview because you go so in-depth on this conference. I know you do like 50-plus pages every single offseason. You're doing amazing work over at Mid-Major Madness, so love to get people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like at 1% of research at this point. So this is, you're not getting the full pie right now because it's just not the full pie. I'm just gathering the ingredients to bake it in terms of my knowledge of this league coming into the season. But yeah, I'll have the MAAC season preview for Mid-Major Madness in October. More stuff for Mid-Major Madness in October throughout the season as well. I'll have basket under review stuff as well. Brackets, bubbles, and bitch stealers. We're doing some off-season stuff. Not a ton, but we're definitely doing some right now. And then Twitter at Sam_Federman. You can find me there.
And Sam, he does such an amazing job looking at this incredible sport of college basketball, one of the hardest workers out there. Big thanks to Sam for joining me on Coast South by the VC Family Podcast. Coming next, I get you my projector or finish for the Metro. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It's always great to be joined by Sam Federman. He does such an incredible job looking at this wonderful conference of the Metro every single time he joins me, and he's joined me a few times for this Metro Conference preview. He always delivers a good, just top-notch information always from him. So big thanks to Sam for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. Now it is that time of the podcast to give you my projector or finish for the Metro. And due to the fact that I'm doing a conference preview today, that means that any college basketball news and notes that happened yesterday, I'm going to polish those up on the podcast tomorrow. I always try to give as much sparkle and shine as humanly possible to these conference previews, so that way, if you're listening to this conference preview in late July, early August, September, October, even as we're getting set to tip off the season, they're getting good evergreen information. So these are going to be standalone podcasts, and the Metro, it certainly does deserve it. This is going to be a fun conference, so let's dive in with my projector or finish. At number 13 in my projector or finish for the Metro Conference, I am going to be going with Rider. For Rider, just a rough year for them last year. They shot 27.7% from three-point range. Dead stinking last out of 365 Division I teams. Now, they were able to grab a few offensive rebounds. That was one forte of this team, top 100 team in terms of percentage of missed shots that became an offensive rebound, mainly because they had a lot of offensive rebounds to grab. But these guys like a Flash Burton and company from a season ago, they lose so many of these guys. Cruz in the backcourt as well. They're going to be looking to Mark Butler, who last year over at Lafayette, about 10.7 points, a little bit over 4 assists per game. So he can provide a little bit of something there, but I still have so many serious question marks about this team not having anything down low this season. A team that had a tough time both generating turnovers and taking care of the ball themselves. Do bring in Bryce Baker. I remember a few seasons ago over at Winthrop, he shot about 39.3% from three, was a solid scorer for them. Khalil Farmer saw a few minutes over at UMass Lowell last season, but hard to really see a path forward for this Rider team, and I believe the university is in a lot of debt as well. And if you're betting on Rider a lot this year, you'll be in a lot of debt this year as well, because last year they were one of the least profitable teams in all of college basketball. So number 13 in my projector or finish, I go with Rider. Number 12 in my projector or finish for the Metro Conference, going to be going with Canisius. Now, Vinny Sagana, hopefully I got that correct. He comes over from East Texas A&M. He was averaging 8 points, shot 40% from three. For Canisius, I actually feel like they took a few strides forward last year. Jim Christian is a guy that has honestly done a relatively solid job at the mid-major ranks. He got his crack at the high level with Boston College many years ago. That just didn't necessarily turn out the greatest, but still, I do think that he's going to be able to upgrade this team a little bit more moving forward, but I do think that the middle of the Metro is going to be relatively solid, and this is a Canisius team that I just don't think is going to be very good on the glass this season as well. I have a lot of question marks as to what you're going to be able to get out of that front court. Additionally, you bring in Priest Ryan. He was able to average about 7 points, 4 rebounds per game over at Cleveland State last year. He should be able to help out. Michael Wilson Jr. comes in from Bellarmine, but I'm not seeing a lot of depth on this this team, other than Sagnona. Hopefully I got that correct. You really don't have a lot of, shall we say, guys that are really wanting to have the ball in their hands as well. So I do think that it's going to be a rough year for Canisius once again. I've got them in my projector finish in the Metro Conference at number 12. Number 11 in my projector finish, going with Niagara. Ever since Greg Paulus has gone there, this has been a team that's very much relied upon their backcourt. They never really are strong down low. 347th last year in terms of offensive rebound percentage, with only 21.6% of their misses becoming an offensive rebound. Now, Long Beach State transfer Colin Farrell should be able to help out with that a little bit. He was able to give the team 6.5 points per game last season. Additionally, you bring back Trenton Walters, if I'm not mistaken, 2.7 assists, shot about 35.5% from three. Niagara, they're one of the more spread out teams here in the Metro, so they might be able to pick off a team or two in terms of their home games. And I do like the fact that you've got Baston Reber, who was able to average a little bit of something last year as well. Logan Woods comes over from Wright State. But again, where's the pop going to be coming from down low? They're banking on Tay Blackshear, who was a solid player over at Youngstown State last year. He was averaging 6.5 points. He's able to give you a little bit of size right around about a 6'5", 6'6", a little bit of a joker player to help. But this team, they were 332nd in terms of points scored on a per possession basis last year. The offense was relatively stagnant despite having some okay three-point shooting. I just don't see a path forward because I think that they're going to get lambasted once again down low. So number 11 in terms of my projector finish for the Metro Conference, I'm going to be going with Niagara. And number 10 in my projector finish for the Metro Conference, I go with Manhattan. For Manhattan, they just had a lot of you-know-what hit the fan last year with Will Sidner. He was supposed to be their top player. He does not see the floor at all last season. That leads to them being 333rd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis on defense. Weren't a whole heck of a lot better on offense, but they've been able to reload. Kevin Kearney is going to be coming over from St. Joe's. He's a guy that should be able to help out a little bit down low, be able to give them a little bit of scoring pop. Karan Elliott, he's a guy that should be able to take some strides forward after averaging 3.5 points per game. And this team is going to be better on the defensive glass than last year. Out of 365 Division I teams, they were 361st in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams rebounded 36.7% of their misses as an offensive rebound, bringing in a guy like Ben Tweedy, who is really versatile over at Colgate, if I'm not mistaken, began his career over at UW Green Bay. 9.5 points, 2.5 assists. He was able to shoot it at about a 38.5% clip from three-point range. He's a guy that I really like. And additionally, I just think that this is a better coaching staff in general as well. John Gallagher has been handed a bad hand, whether that be back when he was over in the America East Conference over at Hartford. Now he's over at Manhattan, and last season we saw everything just go to mush for him. I think that things are going to be a little bit better here for Manhattan. So I've got them in my projector finish in the Metro Conference here at number 10. And number 9 in my projector finish for the Metro Conference, I'm going to be going with Mount St. Mary's. The one thing that Mount St. Mary's really needs to clean up is the fact that they were absolutely terrible on the turnover front last year. Like, this is a team that year in and year out, when they're at their peak, they're a really good rebounding team. Last year, 259th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They were second worst in terms of most turnovers per possession on offense. When you're not getting as many shots at the basket as your opponent, that leads to a lot of losses. So they're bringing in, hopefully you get the same correct, Wilguns Exacte, who was over at Drake last season, 7.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. You bring in a guy like Akade Omes, who was on Gonzaga's bench last season. That's going to be able to help out. And then Red Thompson, I like what he brings to the table. Comes over from Longwood, where he was averaging about 10 points, pair of assists per contest. They've done a nice job in terms of beefing up down low. And then Anthony Arrington, he's a guy that, if I'm not mistaken, began his career over at Wofford. I think that he's got a little bit of upside. You've got a 7-footer and Yakad Diop as well. So this team is going to be good down low. I still have fear with the turnovers, though. They don't necessarily have that one bona fide point guard that I think is going to be able to clean that up. So as a result, with Mount St. Mary's, I've got them number 9 in my projector finish. Number 8, I go with Siena. Siena is going to be going with Nevada because they lose Jerry McNamara after he led them to the NCAA tournament last year. Nevada Smith, who was an assistant over at Marquette. As we know, Marquette had their struggles last season, but he does learn from a guy in Shaka Flocka Flame Smart, who was always very good with regards to his coaching. And I think that Marquette is in for a better year this year. A little bit of a side note, but when it comes to the Siena bunch, they're getting Reed Descharme back. He was limited due to injury last year. A guy that 2 years ago was averaging about 4.5 points per game, if I'm not mistaken, began his career over at Xavier. So you've got some nice potential there. And I'm going to get this name incorrect, but the VMI transfer at point guard, Tan Yidzaglu, he was able to put in there 10 points, 3.5 boards, 4.7 assists per game. A little bit of a do-it-all guy. Now, was VMI very good last year? No, they were not. But I do think that for Nevada Smith, he's got some good resources. Siena is a very proud program. They're going to be able to put the pieces around him. And Pace Prosser, he was a dominator at Division II Gannon last year. 18.5 points, 5.5 boards, 4.5 assists, 2.2 steals per game. And then when you bring back a guy like an Isaiah Henderson, I don't think that the fall off is going to be massive for Siena. I think that they're going to be more towards the middle of the conference. You just have to temper expectations when you lose a coach and so much of the talent that, really gave Duke a good game in the NCAA tournament last year, but I've got them in my projector finish for the Metro Conference at number 8. Number 7 in my projector finish for the Metro Conference, I'm going to be going Sacred Heart. This is a Sacred Heart team that under Anthony Latina has always wanted to bomb it from three-point range. This is a team that always ranks in the top 30, top 35 in terms of percentage of their field goal attempts that come from three-point range, and last year they were a top 75 team with their three-point shooting percentage at 35.7%. JoJo Walls, he comes in from Southern New Hampshire University. Yeah, that's Southern New Hampshire University, and he averaged 24.8 points per game. I don't think he's going to be doing that at the Division I level, but bona fide scorer, shot 40+% from three-point range on volume. And then Joe Vangenhout, hopefully I got that correct, he comes in after he was over at Indiana State. For Joe, we'll just keep it simple here, he was able to average about 3 assists per game, so you've got a facilitator here for a team that they were well outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. This is always a team that's a little bit lackluster on defense, but Abdul Yad, I think that he's going to be able to take some strides forward. He was averaging 6 points per game, and then you've got a Richmond transfer in Jalen Robinson, I think is going to upgrade this team as well. So with this Sacred Heart team, I think that there's some strides forward that they're going to be taking. I've got them number 7 in my projector finish for the Metro. And number 6 in my projector finish for the Metro, I'm going with Quinnipiac. When you lose a guy like an Amari Monroe from a season ago, that's relatively rough. I really do enjoy what Tom Pecora has been able to do for this program. He's been able to get this team to 15 plus wins pretty much every year that he's been there, and this was one of the more balanced teams in the conference last year. They were a top 50 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They were a top 35 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. They were outside the top 300 in their own two-point shooting percentage, and losing a lot of that from down low from a season ago, I do think that that's going to be hurting them. They do have Keith Gimme just one more McKnight, though. I really like this guy. Last year, he's given the team 11 points, 5 boards, a little bit over a steal per contest, and with Quinnipiac, they're not afraid to go down to the non-Division I ranks. From Gannon College, you've got Lucas Sakosi, who was able to supply about 11 points, 5 boards, 4.5 assists. Just a nice statue stuffer that I really feel like fits this Quinnipiac team. With Quinnipiac, they always do a really nice job in terms of just being able to man up on the glass. Ty Turnage should be able to take some strides forward, and Holden Pierre-Louis didn't necessarily see a ton of minutes over at Cleveland State, a traveled man throughout his college basketball sort of tenure. I think that he's going to be able to give you a little bit of something. For Quinnipiac, on paper, they don't necessarily wow me, but I'm just willing to bank on Tom Pecora being able to get this team more towards the middle of the conference. I've got Quinnipiac number 6 in terms of my projector or finish for the Metro, and Mambo number 5 in my projector or finish for the Metro Conference. I go with Iona. Iona was really good in terms of guarding the three-point line last year. They were, in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, a top 30 team last year. That said, they had some issues down low. They really dominated on the glass, so they're looking at Kevin Vanderhorst, who was really good over at Drexel team, that they're always nice on the glass. He was able to give that team 9 points, 3 assists, and a steal per contest to be able to help upgrade there. And Martin Khalil, he was over last season at Idaho State. He's going to be able to give this team some three-point shooting pop. Shot over 35% from 3, about a 9-point per game scorer. They're bringing in someone like an Aiden Dessou, who was over at Holy Cross, that was able to give you 5 rebounds per game. It feels like there's some good potential here as well with Keshawn Mitchell. Really didn't see a lot of minutes last season over at VCU. 2 years ago, was a nice part of that Bryant team that made the NCAA tournament as well. And then we got Aliu Fall, who's got some upside, a little bit over block, 4 rebounds per game, provides some size. I think that Iona is going to be a little bit improved down low. I do think that they take some strides forward in season number 2 under their coaching regime. So Iona is Mambo number 5 in my projector finish for the Metro Conference. Number 4 in my projector finish in the Metro Conference, I'm going to be going with St. Peter's. St. Peter's always has issues with the guards who are shooting. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, but they're always so strong on defense. 17th in the country in opponents' three-point shooting percentage last year, and when they were at home, teams only shot about 28%. And number 4 in my projector finish for the Metro Atlantic Conference, I'm going to be going with St. Peter's. They were overall a top 70 team in opponents' three-point shooting percentage last year. Team shot just 28% from three-point range in their home games. Team was 12th in offensive rebound percentage. They had a lot of misses to be able to rebound, but they did rebound 35.9% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. And I do think that the Rice transfer, Trey Patterson, who he actually began his career over at Villanova, just a wild story there. He's going to be able to give this team a little bit of upside. You've got Akeel Watson, who comes over from UMass. I think that there's some upside, and they're going to be eating it up with Bryce Eaton. 11 points, 3 boards, 4 assists, a little bit of a steal per contest. They bring back a heart and soul guard from a season ago. You don't find that a lot in the Metro because the Metro has lost a lot of players due to the transfer portal. They were able to retain a few of their own. Phoenix Glasner, he's a guy that comes over from Toledo as well. I think that he's going to see some good minutes for a team that year in and year out, the defense is going to be there. Offense, free throw shooting, always a little bit suspect with St. Peter's, but I think the defense, it's going to win out in this conference, and I've got St. Peter's number 4 in my projector or finish. And number 3 in my projector or finish, I go with Fairfield. This team was really good on the glass last year. 20th in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They rebounded 34.6%. Other misses as an offensive rebound, and in their road games, 8th in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Kalon Wolfing, hopefully I got that correct. That's a really hard last name to say. He was averaging 12 points, 8.5 boards. And then Kadir Martin. He comes over from the Northeast Conference, about 11.5 points, 7 boards, 2.4 blocks per game when he was over at Mercyhurst last season. You've got a guy in Tony Williams who was a nice contributor as a freshman with about 6.5 points per game. They had a few guys that were out due to injury last season, like Eric Mejia was a guy that was riddled by injury. Peyton Smith was a nice part of this team 2 years ago. He was missing due to injury. So being able to get back some of these guys that were out due to injury last year, additionally being able to build upon what was a really strong base down low, has me very bullish on the Sags of Fairfield in there. Last year in the Metro Conference, they're going to be actually next year in the Coastal Conference. I've got Fairfield number 3 in my projector or finish. And number 2 in my projector or finish for the Metro Conference, I'm going to be going with Merrimack. You know that this Merrimack team is going to be so good on defense. 12th in opponent's 3-point shooting percentage last year at 30.3%, back in the top 20 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and they did the little things well. 8th in the country in terms of free throw shooting percentage at 78.8%. They always get land-based on the glass. They're always a bottom 30 team with regards to rebound percentage. They're going to need Todd Brogdon, who came over 2 seasons ago from Stone Hill. Had a little bit of a slow year last year. 6 points, 4.5 boards. I expected maybe a little bit more from him. I think that he does take that leap this year. Denver Englund, he's a guy that is familiar with Iona. If I'm not mistaken, he was over at Rice and a few other places as well. 9.5 points per game, and then you've got a guy in Eli Wilborn who he has had a long and winding road. Back when he was over at St. Francis of Pennsylvania a few seasons ago, he was averaging like 10.5 points, 7.5 boards. He's been really riddled by injuries and just didn't get a lot of playing time over at James Madison in the last year or two as well. But I do think that there is quite a bit of upside. You're bringing in some of these guys like hopefully I get this one correct, Aram Soki Obano to be able to help out down low a little bit as well. So I do think that for Merrimack, they're going to be right back towards the top of the conference, have yet to bust through and make a Division I NCAA tournament. I think that might be eluding them once again this year, but I think that they're right there in terms of this hunt for the Metro Conference. I've got them number 2 in my projector or finish. And at number 1 in my projector or finish for the Metro Conference, give me Marist. I recognize that this team was rough on offense last year, 278th in the country if you look at raw points scored on a per possession basis, but getting back Jaden Cullen Roberts, who was able to average 7 points, 4.5 boards, 3 assists, a little bit over a steal per game. Nice stat sheet stuff is nice. I like the fact that they bring in the New Hampshire transfer in Jack Graham, 11 points, a little bit over a steal per game. Not a guy that's going to go bombs away from 3-point range, but for Marist, you don't need that. This team is built around good rebounding. They're built around being really stout down low. Year in and year out, you'll always find this team like in the top 20, top 25 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Miles Parker was a guy that in a small sample size of about 5 points per game shot it relatively well from 3 as well to be able to give you that element. 38.5% 3-point shooting. Got a guy in Tariq Watson who was limited to only 10 games last year, but he was solid in that small sample size with about 6 points per game. Jordan Gabriel's another guy that I think takes some strides forward. Marist does very much rely upon a little bit more depth, even though they're a slow tempo team. They're always in the bottom 75 in terms of total possessions per game, but they do a nice job cycling out their guys so that way they're fresh on the glass. I really like this style in general. I think that it gets Marist back to the NCAA tournament for our first time in a very, very long time. Marist, my number 1 team in my projector or finish for the Metro Conference. And that'll wrap things up for the Metro Conference Preview Edition right here on Cuss Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Cuss Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast here in the off season, taking a look at the news and notes of college basketball and getting you set for what is going to be the most amazing college basketball season ever. And then once we get back in season, picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. And you're getting these conference previews for every conference as well. Big thanks once again to our guy, Sam Federman, does such great work over at Major Madness. He is a master of the Metro. He joined me in segment number 2, and I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.